is Benedicto Penaloza Betancourt, but you can call me Benny. I just graduated U of O. I'm really excited about that. And the next step is now I got hired through through the RARE program, which helps rural communities, to go work in Woodburn. The Latino community in Springfield, Eugene seems to be growing and seems to be more able to express themselves with their stores and different events. There's also a lot of great programs here in this area, like Centro Latino and Huerta de la Familia. We first started living in apartments when I was very little, just because that was what we could afford. Although every year they would raise the prices, so my dad figured that it'd be best to find a way to get a house. And the best way for our family to do that was applying to the Habitat for Humanity, which gave our family an opportunity to buy our own home at an affordable rate. And it was a 2-year process of them putting in hours, building other people's houses, and fundraising enough funds for their own house. It seemed very beneficial to the community. They offer a support that nobody else really offers in the same capacity of providing a home that you could call your own, where like many housing programs tend to be rental systems, and you're only there until you can find other housing. And we've lived there now for 12 years, about. It's a cozy little place. It's not too big, but my parents love to garden, and so they garden there. They have a big orchard right behind our house. My personal family, we didn't have much trouble with renters and landlords, that kind of stuff. We were able to get our housing before this big housing crisis really happened, thankfully.
Buenas tardes, amigos, gracias por visitarnos. Mi nombre es Esteban Peralta, mucha gente me conoce por el Caimán, gracias a Dios. Llevamos aquí 23 años en Springfield, Oregon, trabajando duro para lograr nuestros sueños. Lo empezamos hace 12 años, tocando puertas, vendiendo cobijas, carteras. Empezamos de muy abajo. Yo empecé lavando platos en restaurantes, en files, y gracias a Dios, primero mi Padre Jehová y a la comunidad que me ha ido subiendo escalón por escalón y siempre manteniendo los pies en la tierra, siempre siendo humildes, no siendo presumidos, y es lo que me ha mantenido, gracias a Dios, 12 años. Un saludo para mi familia, que por ellos empezamos esto. Incluso yo tengo un servicio de money orders, ahí monitoreo yo a las personas cuando vienen a pagar su renta. Hay personas que están renteros, que dan ese servicio a las personas, pero abusan en el precio de la renta. Me gustaría que hubiera un sistema donde pudieran regularizar el precio de las rentas para que fuera posible y acceso a vivienda a personas, porque ha aumentado mucho el precio de la renta. Otro que sí hemos visto, muchas personas vienen aquí buscando si tenemos información de cuartos de renta o de casas. Sí hemos visto que hay mucho aumento en ese aspecto.
My name is Genevieve Middleton, and my preferred pronouns are she, her, hers, and they, them. At the City of Eugene, I am an affordable housing planning and policy manager for Community Development Division within the Planning and Development Department. I've been in Eugene since I was 1 year old, and my parents moved here from California. My mom is full Navajo, and as an Indigenous person, she has experienced a lot of trials and tribulations. The neighborhood that we grew up in, which was about a middle-class neighborhood, has now flourished to being a rather middle-upper neighborhood, and a home that was bought for 30 years ago for $35,000 is now eligible for sale for over $500,000. My focus is in affordable housing as I look at production, protections, and preservation. And so production is the creation of housing. Protections are protecting people who exist here and live here from displacement and from becoming so cost burdened that they enter into homelessness. And then preservation, so looking at our housing stock now that we have and making sure that the housing that serves the lowest income people doesn't enter into blight or a condition that means that the house is uninhabitable. In the Western region, we have the tightest rental housing market with around 4.6% availability. And in Eugene, about 3 years ago, a study done showed that it was around 2.5%. And recently in 2021, a CoStar data source that looks at multifamily housing found that we're down to less than 1.5%. And the national average is up around 6%. So we have an extremely tight rental housing market here. We also know that 52% of the Eugene's population are renters. So more than half of our population are renters. And more than half of that population are extremely cost burdened. Anecdotally, we hear through not only channels at the city, but also through the NAACP and the Springfield Eugene Tenant Association that BIPOC community members are experiencing higher levels of rental discrimination. They're experiencing the discrimination when they're trying to apply for rents. They're also experiencing higher levels of no-cause evictions, and they're experiencing higher levels of harassment from their landlords or neighbors in their neighborhoods.
My name is Stuart Warren, he, him pronouns, and I am a Land Conservation Development Commission Commissioner. I am a single commissioner on a 6-person commission, and I've been doing it for almost 3 years now. And we make the rules for Oregon's land use system. That sets the overarching rules for housing and transportation throughout Oregon. Well, we've started working on the housing situation with House Bill 2001 when that was passed. We were the commission responsible for making the rules for reforming Oregon zoning codes to allow duplexes, triplexes, quadplexes, and townhomes in single-family zoning. Depending on the size of the city, there's different rules that are set for those different cities. And what we tried to accomplish there was increase the density of our cities, and therefore increasing the supply of housing. And by increasing the supply of housing, in theory, we should be able to reduce the cost of housing overall. Currently, we're working on rules that are called the Climate Friendly and Equitable Communities Rulemaking, and that's also seeking to increase the density of our cities, especially in kind of the downtown urban cores. And part of this role is to increase the number of homes available for folks that aren't single-family homes, because we know single-family homes are fairly expensive when compared to apartments or townhomes or duplexes. And 2 is to really connect where people live to where they work, so that they don't have to pay for costly fuel prices to transport themselves to and from work or own a car. So this set of rules is not passed yet. We've passed temporary rules in May, but final adoption will be in July, coming up here pretty soon. Right now, we're also working on House Bill 2003, which was passed at the same time as House Bill 2001. But what we found is the initial set of rules did not go far enough to address how cities measured their housing supply. And so what House Bill 2003 really did was change the way that we measure housing from a city-by-city basis to a regional basis, thinking about major towns that are employment centers and trying to connect them to their outlying cities, so that when we look at that overall housing supply within regions, that we can connect the 2 dots, so that folks who work in downtown city centers don't have to live on the outskirts of town, and they can better afford to live closer to where they work.
We're seeing that the trends on rental housing across the nation are tight. We're seeing that they're tight everywhere, and they're really tight here. And that the cost of living has become so expensive that people aren't able to move, and we're seeing an increased level of families who are, we're now seeing co-housing. So we're seeing many generations living in one household. You know, it's something that we see internationally is that what is a component of a household, what is considered a family household, that dominant cultural vision here in the US is that it's very centered around heteronormative, white dominant culture. A man, a woman, maybe 1 to 3 children, that's your family. You can have a dog and a cat. And if you're more than that, you're not fitting within our vision. And so we see internationally that there are other cultural ways that families exist and live within housing units. And so we can have housing laws and policies that are not being culturally inclusive of international people and also indigenous people worldwide. So when leading with a racial equity lens, we want to make sure that those who are the most severely housing cost burdened and housing burdened can get increased access to housing. So very frequently that means that BIPOC households are the ones who need to be served and are the ones who experience the least access to housing. I think for the City of Eugene, one of the visions that we have that's a component of the Anti-Displacement Action Plan is to look at some of the innovative housing that is happening in other regional cities. And what I appreciate that is a component of state housing is the agricultural worker housing. And I would like to see that housing style be introduced to Eugene. Another innovative housing type that I'd like to see in Eugene is to utilize Indian tribal housing. The Confederated Tribes of Siletz Indians did a collaboration with the Native American Youth and Family Center in Portland. And that creation of housing creates culturally specific housing for tribally recognized citizens of the Confederated Tribes of Siletz, as well as second prioritization for other citizens of tribal nations.
The state of Oregon, and particularly the Land Conservation Development Commission and the Department of Land Conservation Development, have really taken great strides to try to increase both inclusion and participation in our public engagement processes. In fact, the Commission has asked the department to look at updating what's called Goal 1, which is citizen involvement, and trying to create a more welcoming environment for folks who are underserved, and particularly Latinx folks, to participate within the legislative process.
There's also obviously that language barrier that exists that is the case for landlords and residents. And as time goes on, I assume that language will become less of a barrier as a growing Latino population grows. They're more introduced into the language of English, and the English speakers as well, they understand Spanish more because they're going to have to just out of necessity for their clients.
In order to address equity, we have to overrepresent underrepresented folks. And I think a lot of our department staff have done a great job of identifying leaders from around Oregon who can help to increase the number of especially Latinx folks who are representing the rest of Oregonians. And this process will take us a while to overcome, but we've started it, I think, in a very meaningful way. And through that meaningful engagement and inclusion, I think that Oregon will be better off. But the way that planning works is that you typically don't see a dramatic change for a number of years, probably close to 20. So as we continue to work down this path and update Oregon's land use system, I think we will start to see a more inclusive and engaged public across the board, and hopefully that will help lead to better outcomes for underrepresented people.
We have an area in Eugene that's on between 6th and 7th Street. It's a very high traffic neighborhood, And there's a lot of dotted, naturally occurring, affordable housing apartment buildings in that area. And we see individuals who don't live, decision makers, maybe elected officials who don't live in those apartments who talk about those areas as being blighted, as being like terrible places to live. But then we also see, a lot of cultural richness that dominant cultured person might not understand, like the barber shop, like the taquerias that are down the street.
Tenemos varios amigos de varios lugares y aprende uno culturas, aprende uno sus dialectos, sus comidas. Es bonito. Este negocio, aparte de que sí me genera para comer, para sobrevivir, me gusta porque conocemos gente.
And that there are cultures that exist within those neighborhoods, and we have to respect and recognize those communities as well. Even though they don't meet the dominant culture's vision of what community is, it's still community.